Hey everyone, I'm Sam from Cosplay. In this video I'm going to show you how I made Boo's ankle bits and his belt. Boo has these little ankle cuff things, so I started patterning that out in aluminum foil and duct tape. There's what that's looking like currently. When I patterned it I had the Boo pants on, so now I'm going to cover this in masking tape and then draw on the pattern and cut it apart. I figure I can probably just do one seam up the front and one up the back. I've got the ankle covered in masking tape and my seams drawn on, just one up the front, one up the back. I'm going to cut along the seams, peel the tape off, and transfer it to paper. It's looking like this corner in the front doesn't really want to lay flat. It's kind of crumpling up a lot, so I think I'm going to cut a line up it this way and then cut this off and make these two separate pieces. Then all that's laying flat. It seems to be okay with just cutting it off that way, so that works out. So I only have to do this in 4 pieces altogether. Got my patterns transferred to paper, and then that's been transferred to foam. I'm going to start off with 8mm foam, and then I'll see if I end up needing to do it in 6 instead. I'll cut this out and get it glued together with barge. Got half of the ankle glued together, but on some spots, like right here, there's a bit of a lump on the edge where it was glued together, so I'm just going to smooth that out with the Dremel before gluing the other half on. Alright, final seam. I've got 2 coats of barge on it. It's ready to glue together. A lot of times I'll brace the piece against my torso so I can push and pull it in the proper direction so that everything lines up where it needs to go. And also I can keep it like spread out and pushed against me so it doesn't stick in a spot before I want it to. There it is, assembled. So this is going to have a half dowel border around the edge, just like the gauntlets. But I want to trim the bottom of this so it's flat first. Right now the way the foam is angled, it's like arced up. So basically I want to just trim that edge off and then I'll smooth it out with the Dremel. Like that. So I'll do that on both the ankles and then use the Dremel, probably with just a sanding drum or the stone bit, and smooth it out, and then I can glue on the foam dowel. Since these come to a point on the front, I need to first line up the dowel on the front and then trim it at the proper angle. I'll just line it up here and then line up with my seam and try to give it a trim. And then I'll probably trim the other side as well and glue those together first. That way I know the front is going to be lined up, have a nice edge. Now I can glue this on just like I did for the gauntlets. So just like the gauntlets, when I get to the end here, I'm going to trim it off and then glue that with super glue. This one's at an angle, so I'm going to try to do my best to get the angle right. I'll actually take a Sharpie and kind of mark roughly where I think it needs to be and try to line that up when I cut it. That's close enough. We'll just plop in the super glue, wipe away the excess, and then spray it with some accelerant. Now I can do the tops, which should be a little bit easier. I don't actually have enough foam dowel left for the tops, so either have to order some or go without it for now. I found some half dowels I already have that are a little bit smaller, not by a ton, but a little bit. These I believe are from TNT Cosplay Supply, so I might just go ahead and use these. That way I can finish it, and I don't think it's gonna look that bad, right? It should be fine. I think that looks pretty okay. You can tell it's a little smaller, but it's not terrible. I'm prepping all the EVA foam bits for when they'll eventually be sealed and painted, so I'm going over it with some 400 grit sandpaper and just sanding the seams until they feel pretty smooth. Some of the seams were already okay. Some of them had slight lumpy spots, and some of them just had like a raised section where some of the barge poked out. Just trying to get it looking nice and uniform. Then after my piece has been sanded, I'm going to hit it with the heat gun just to get rid of any fuzziness and make the surface more uniform with the rest that's already been heat sealed. I'm going to fill in any gaps in the seams with some DAP Quick Seal. Do that, I'm just going to ooze it out along the seam and then use one of these plastic spatulas to moosh it into the seam and scrape away the excess. I'll just wipe that on a paper towel. And you can kind of see the spots where it starts to fill in, like here. And then I'll dip my finger in some water. I have a bowl of water here. And kind of do tiny circular motions to smooth this out. And this will shrink a little bit when it starts to dry, so I'll probably need to go over spots like this one again until they're filled out and level. My layers of quick seal are dry, so now I'm going to go over it with some 400 grit sandpaper and even out the texture a bit, because right now it's got a little bit of like a grit to it, so just want to knock that down before it's sealed. So now it's nice and smooth. I can sand all the other pieces and then move on to sealing. To seal the gauntlets and the ankle bits, I'm going to be using Flex Bond, and I just have a relatively soft brush, and I've got it in this little pink container and a bowl of water. And I've thinned it a little bit just with a little bit of water, but then every now and then I'll dip my brush into the water before applying it. That way it goes on in pretty thin coats and it doesn't get like a ton of clumps and brush strokes and things. I don't want it so thin that it's going to be runny though. And when it starts getting a little more goopy and less thin, like here, I'll dip my brush in the water or try to spread it out a little bit more. I think I'm going to airbrush these armor bits, or try to at least. Got some little squares of foam with a wire through them so I can hang these up later. I'm just going to put a little bit of hot glue on one side of that, and then stick that inside the piece and hold it till it dries, and then I'll be able to hang this up and have something to hold it from so I can paint the whole thing at once. So I'm going to be using Createx Opaque Black. Starting on Boo's belt, and he has this M on it for Majin Buu. So for the belt itself, I'm using this like super high density foam from TNT Cosplay Supply. I found it works pretty well for belts in the past just because it's super sturdy. To make the pattern for that, I just wrapped tape around my waist and drew it on. I didn't film that though. And then here's the buckle section. But this needs to be cut out, so I'm just going to try to cut out with an X-Acto knife. The sides of this are pretty round though, so I'm going to go around and sand it all down so it's not just super flat. This is out of 6mm foam, by the way. Okay, I've got the edges looking how I want. Now I'm going to hit it with the heat gun just to seal. I've marked out where the M belt buckle goes. Now I'm going to glue it down with some barge. Alright, I put 2 coats of barge on this, dried and all tacky. Now I'm going to stick it down. Now there's a little bit of overlap in some spots like here, so I'm just going to hit that with the Dremel and make the edges look even. For Boo's belt, I've been coating it in Hex Flex. Haven't used this before, but it's a paint and sealer in one, and it kind of smells like it's like a PVA glue based. But I guess I'm not positive. But I've just been brushing that on the belt portion. Paint the gold bits, I'm going to use Angelus leather paints, pearlescent 18K gold, and in order to airbrush it, I'll be mixing it with some of their Too Thin. They recommend 1 part of the Too Thin to 4 parts paint. So let's first get our paint in a cup, and then I'll just kind of guesstimate how much of the thinner. Mix that up. Then, since I want to reduce the possibility for clogs, I'm going to strain it into another cup. I'll set this cup aside in case I need to mix some more. Then I'm going to put some of the paint in the airbrush, and I'll start by spraying it on a paper towel just to see if I've got the right PSI and if it's going to come out okay. So there, I need a little bit more air coming through. That's looking better. So I could have taped these off to only get the gold paint on the edges, but I think it's going to be easier just to hand paint some of the black back on later instead of taking the time to tape it all off. So I'm spraying this at around 30 psi. Here's kind of how thin my paint is. I'd say it's pretty milky, like it kind of lingers on the popsicle stick for a second. It doesn't just come right off like water. And when I'm spraying, I don't want to go too heavy. So I'm just doing thin layers I don't want it to build up too quick and get drips or mess it up on accident. So I'm also not the best at airbrushing, so I tend to try to be pretty careful. See there, now it's starting to look pretty gold on the second coat. I think that's looking pretty good, so I'm going to hang this up to dry. I'm going to do the same thing with the belt. For this, I don't even know how I would tape off the M anyway, so I think this is kind of my only option. I'm trying not to spray like underneath so I don't get the edges of it. I'd like the edges to stay black, I think. These inside edges here, I mean, just to kind of give it a border. So I'm trying to spray like straight down. I don't know if that's actually gonna work. I'm seeing the cat hairs that were in the, can't really tell on camera. Definitely a cat hair in there. I think there's a cat hair in every one of my costumes. Hard to avoid. Looking pretty cool. I never have any issues with airbrushing Angela's paint. Other airbrush paints I seem to have difficulty with sometimes. Maybe I'm just not using great ones, or maybe because they're pre-mixed and just not compatible with the needle I'm using or whatever. I don't know. But whenever I mix the Angela's paints with the thinner, it always seems to go on very nicely. That's cool. My gold paint is dry. Now I'm going to go back in with some black Angela's paint and clean up these edges. There it is, all cleaned up. Now I just have to do that for all the other pieces and it'll be good to go. And here's how the belt turned out. I think it looks pretty cool. I still need to add some fasteners on it so I can take it on and off, but that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing. I'll have links to everything down below. Follow me on social media, and I'll see you next time.